Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this year's National Child Protection Week webinar series, Every Child in Every Community Needs a Fair Go. It's my pleasure to lead you through today's discussion. Just a little bit of an introduction. So my name is Kylie Captain and I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman. I'm an author and an educator and the president of the Aboriginal Studies Association. I'm pleased to be here this morning and to invite two other, my deadly brother and sisters on the call with me this morning. But before we begin, I'm just going to start by acknowledging country today. I'm dialing in from beautiful Dharawal country, and as a proud Gamilaroi woman from Walgett in northwest New South Wales, I want to acknowledge the lands on which I'm dialing in from today and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and those old people that have paved the way, to make this a great country, that we all have opportunities here today. I'd also acknowledge the land in which you're dialing in from today as well, and ask the ancestors of that country to be with you as we all gather this morning to really talk about child protection and the important things that I guess we could all be doing to ensure that our children are safe and supported by culture and they can grow up strong and proud and deadly and really embrace who they are in this safe, beautiful country. A little bit about me. I'll just quickly introduce myself a little bit further. So as I mentioned, I'm off country today, so I'm dialing in from Dharawal country in southwest Sydney. I've worked in sort of child protection and education for a long time now. So I've actually been a carer. So at 21, I was a full-time carer of my nephew, who was 12 years old at the time. I've worked in education now for the last 13 years, but as well as being a carer, I actually worked as a child protection and early intervention caseworker as well at Lakemba CSC. So I'm actually, I really value the work that you do. It's important work. Most recently, I have written a book. I guess I've overcome quite a bit of grief and trauma, as many of us do. I grew up in Redfern and Waterloo, in the inner city suburbs of Sydney. And throughout my grief and trauma and, I guess, the things that I've experienced, I learned from inspirational people who paved the way for me. So I loved reading books. I loved hearing personal stories, and I managed to, overcome a lot of that grief and that trauma. And I thought, well, if other people can write a book, then perhaps I can too. So I went on my little journey and I published my very first book at the beginning of last year. It's titled Dream Big and Imagine the What If, and an accompanying journal. So I'm all about goal setting. These days I live a life of abundance and choice, and I guess my dream for every child is that they can actually have access to every opportunity. And I chose to work in education because it was a teacher who never gave up on me. She told me that I was smart and that I was deadly and that I could do anything that I'd set my mind to. And I've gone on to become a teacher. I now lead Aboriginal education. I work in Sydney Southwest and support schools in their improvement journey to ensure that, I guess our culture and the truth is taught in every school. And I absolutely love that work. But yes, that's a little bit about my book on the screen that you can see there. If you're interested, you can head to my website or you can scan that QR code if you're interested in learning a little bit more. I am writing book number 2 at the moment with Associate Professor Kathy Burgess, who was that teacher who made a difference for me, and we hope to share yarns. And saying that, education is the key, but I know that the work that you do as well and every interaction that you do, makes a difference for our kids. So, just sometimes those little things that you can say or do can change the trajectory of our young people's lives. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce our guest this morning. If you're not familiar with the go-to webinars, the panel is on the right-hand side. If you do run into technical difficulties, please ring our team. Their numbers are in the chat function as well. In the control panel towards the end, you'll see a questions field. There are a lot of people online today, and we do encourage questions. So please, keep the questions coming in the chat. Have a go now if you like, and just to check that it's working. We'll definitely try to answer those questions. Shortly, I'm going to bring on 2 of my incredible colleagues and deadly brother and sisters on the line this morning. But before we do, we'll make sure that that we're all good and we're ready to go. There'll be handouts and relevant links that will be pasted in the chat function as well and be emailed out to you afterwards. Note that all of our webinars will be recorded and that they will be posted on our website in due course. Just a little bit about National Child Protection Week. we're here, as this week's National Child Protection Week campaign, and the week will continue to embrace the overarching message that every child in every community needs a fair go. In particular, this year, we're shining a light on the fact that children growing up, that our children need to grow up safe and supported in our culture. Children and young people thrive when they're supported by culture. It's really important that we allow them to go about life knowing who they are. And just briefly, for me, I actually have a non-Aboriginal father, and sadly my mum passed away when I was 3 years old, and I've often reflected on, I guess the fact that quite easily he had lots of brothers and sisters who could have taken me in to raise me as their own, but thankfully for me, I had my mum's sister who took me in, and she raised me as her own. She was my auntie, but she quickly became my mum at 3. Her daughters became my sisters, which allowed me to grow up within my Aboriginal community. And every single day I express gratitude for that, because I've been given the opportunity to grow up safe and supported within my own family and community, and I'm the strong, proud, resilient Aboriginal woman that I am today. Just a little bit more housekeeping here, and just a little bit about the theme. I guess it's really important. We know now that, particularly for our Aboriginal children, we're overrepresented in the child protection systems. We know that too many of them miss out on the opportunity to grow up knowing who they are, where they come from, and we know that you'll hear from Isaiah later on as well, and we hear countless stories of our kids, that talk about the fact that culture makes us strong, that connection to our family is really important, and the little things that we can all do now to learn, to maybe relearn or unlearn the truth of our history and our culture, and learn better ways to connect with our families and communities, will allow our children to grow up and know who they are and where they come from, in the diverse and the rich, beautiful country that's here for each and every one of us to share in. We can all do our part, to stop child abuse and neglect. And I know that you're on this call today because you want to do more. And on behalf of the team at NAPCAN, I just want to thank you for giving up your time this morning to join us in this very important yarn. Thank you very much, everyone. Today's yarn is about how connection to culture is keeping children safe. What we do now has an impact, and there are many things that we can all do, and I hope that you'll be inspired by our yarns today and take away some of these incredible things and implement them in the work that you do. This topic, as I mentioned previously, it's one that's very, very close to my heart, and the work that I do now, just go about, just learning about our kids, ensuring that every child has the opportunity to thrive and to be supported. But before I go any further, I just want to make a brief note as well, and just let you know that some of the topics may be sensitive today. So, if something triggers you and you need to step away from your computer, please just turn us off for a bit and come back when you're ready, and have a yarn about some of the things that we talk about today as well. Reach out to a colleague or a friend, and just to make sure that you're well supported as well. But just to know that we are talking about child protection, we are talking about some sensitive issues. So, just feel free to step away if you need to, and to really look after yourself. It is now my absolute pleasure to invite 2 very special people to the call today. I'll just go on, and I just want to firstly thank them and do a very brief intro. Isaiah, the CEO and founder of ID Know Yourself. You will all know about Isaiah. He's doing really deadly work, out there supporting our kids so that they can make sure that they're all, connected and supported in culture. And Nicole Hux, who's the acting Northern Territory's Children's Commissioner. Nicole is responsible for ensuring the well-being of our kids up there as well. So there's a lot of deadly people out there doing their part, and I'm really, really pleased to welcome and introduce you to these very 2 inspirational people on the call with me today. So good morning, brother and sister. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Galango Jali. Good day.
Deadly. And Nicole. Look, this is very much just a yarn this morning, and we are joined, hopefully it'll just be a little bit of an intimate yarn between the 3 of us, but we do know that there's lots of other people that are listening in this morning who want to learn from our yarns and our experiences as well. But as blackfellas, as we go, we always introduce ourselves and who we are and where our mob is from. So I'll just ask you, I might start with you, Sister Nicole, if you can just tell us a little bit about you, introduce yourself, who's your mob, where you're from, and a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, my name's Nicole Hux. I'm a Larrakia, Wodjigan and Arundel woman from the Northern Territory. I'm live here from Darwin, beautiful Darwin, warm sunny day up here. Sorry to all the southern mob who are rugged up and cold this morning. I am currently the Acting Children's Commissioner for the Northern Territory. I've had a bit of a background in child protection, out-of-home care, youth justice more broadly. I spent 7 years down in Victoria living and working, doing a bit of practice down there before I transitioned home to work with mob. As an Aboriginal woman, I have a vested interest and I have accountability to mob, so it was only right to come back home and work up here. The role of the Office of the Children's Commissioner, we're an independent office. We have responsibility for ensuring the safety and well-being of all children across the territory. It's quite a big remit, sometimes overwhelming. I have a great team. We're a small office. I have 10 staff working within the office to take the core functions and powers that we have legislated through Children's Commissioners Act.
Wow, Deadly, thank you very much, sis. Thank you for the work that you do. It's not easy work, but you know, we all value and appreciate the work that you do. Thank you. Over to you, brother, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Yeah, Galango Jali, as said before, so that means hello and good day in my language, which is Bachelor language. My name's Isaiah Dorm, Bachelor and Garawa Saltwater Maori-man. So Bachelors of Harvey Bay, Maryborough, Queensland, and also Gari, which is the traditional name of Fraser Island. It means paradise in our lingo. And I'm also a Garawa descendant, so that's my great-grandfather's side, and my great-grandmother is my Bachelor side. And my skin name is also Yakamari, so we've got 16 skin name, part of our clan, and fortunately through an incredible warrior, Uncle Fred, who's one of our songmen, he's kept that culture alive and passed that on to the next generation, and also myself. So I'm the CEO and founder of ID Know Yourself. So ID Know Yourself is an Aboriginal not-for-profit mentoring organisation, and we support Aboriginal children who are in out-of-home care. So the kids that we work with from the age of 6 years old all the way to 16 years old. And our vision for ID Know Yourself is that there's thousands of Indigenous children who live without their mums and dads every single day. And we create a platform that enables love, hope, and belonging, so every child can have that sense of fulfillment and self-determination in their lives. I started up ID Know Yourself on the back of my own personal experiences of growing up in out-of-home care. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but you know, I kind of grew up just like the kids that we work with. So my whole life's mission and purpose has been making sure that these kids have an empowering life, and they're not a limiting life, and one with choice, you know, one with self-determination in it, and that the kids ultimately have decisions in the childhood, in their own childhood, that I unfortunately didn't have when I was a young kid. And a lot of the work that we do is around advocacy, so not being the voice for the kids. Every kid has a voice, but giving them a platform, just like you know here today. Having this platform to be able to share stories is the same thing that we do with the kids. Make sure that their voices are elevated and that we can give them a platform to be heard.
Amazing. Honestly, it's incredible work, and I think as Aboriginal people as well, we often don't just engage in work, you know, for ourselves. It's always about, you know, what we can do for our family and our wider communities and to make a difference. And I reflect on my experience, you know, being a carer. The reason I decided to go on, you know, and a lot of mob, you know, they were saying, well, Kylie, what are you going to work for docs for? What are you working in child protection for? And I was really honest, and I just said, you know what? I am a carer. I didn't like the way that these you know, most of them are all, you know, non-Aboriginal. I didn't like the way that they were working with me. I didn't like the way that they were working with my family and community. So I thought maybe if I can go in, maybe I can teach them a thing or two on how to better work with our communities, you know, because obviously kids need to stay safe. The work that you do, brother, is absolutely amazing. We want to give our team and the people that are online today some tips in regards to things that they could be doing to actually implement and to make a difference in the work. And just wondering, you know, and we know that relationships are key to making a difference and working with our families and communities. And I just might ask you, you know, I guess you've probably got lots of success stories and as well as lots of challenges, but tips or advice or any thing that, you know, that for our people that are working with our kids and communities, what advice would you give them when they are working with our families? I'll throw to you first, Nicole.
Yeah, look, I think it's critical to be mindful when we're talking about promoting better connection to culture for Aboriginal kids, particularly considering the territory data just released through AIHW in terms of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. We have a majority of Aboriginal children with non-Aboriginal carers. So, you know, it's about understanding the importance of culture, the criticalness of culture for Aboriginal children, and that Aboriginal children are best placed with family, hence the shirt that I'm wearing today.
I love
it. Make that. Look, I think, you know, if, you know, in terms of we're not going to have enough Aboriginal carers in the immediate future to care for our Aboriginal children. So for those non-Aboriginal carers caring for Aboriginal children, just be really mindful that, you know, culture is important. The strength of culture is safety as well. I think we forget that, you know, we think about safety in an environmental sense, a physical, emotional and social sense, but I think we need to really be mindful that culture is also a safety for children. So being able to connect with that child's community, that child's family, the child's country, to enable the child to go back to country, on country regularly, is healing, is important, and it's strengthening. It keeps kids connected. You know, the importance of understanding of self and self-identity, I can't express that any more strongly. Young people, children in their developmental stages through, you know, the formative years, to be able to give them that platform, that strong platform of knowing who they are, where they come from, who their mob is, that's of critical importance.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, sis. Over to you, brother.
That was fantastic, Nicole. That was amazing. And I think that kind of reminds you of yarning about a few things there. It reminded me of a few things about my own kind of experience with our kids, but also personally. And it kind of, when I think about relationships, you know, we work, and I always say to the team, say, look, you know, we focus on our 6 key elements as culture, life skills, education, employment, well-being and advocacy. So that's our 6 pillars, right, that we focus on. But underneath all of that, the backbone is relationships. It's all the time. And there's a quote by Tony Robbins. He says, the quality of your life can be determined upon the quality of your relationships. And I think about the kids who have done really well in our sessions, in our programs, and it's been the kids who have really built those, that kind of have that peer-to-peer support, or the kids who have a strong connection to their buddy, or it's the kids who have that sense of connection to their family. And a lot of the time, you know, we say to the kids, you know, we don't want to kind of replace your family, but we can be your chosen family. You know, we can be your chosen family. We're not blood family, but, you know, blackfellow way as well. You know, you can be your uncle and auntie, we can be your cousin, whatever. And it's all about creating that sense of belonging. And I think about some of our kids and a few things that Nicole had said there around, you know, that sense of belonging that culture creates, that healing. Also, I think for our kids, you know, when I started ID, you know, I'm a Butcher Gadawa man. We've got kids from Gamilaroi, Dungutty, Biripi, even kids from Kukuyalanji mob. So you've got kids from everywhere, right? And, you know, it's not my place to be the ones teaching these kids about their culture. I know nothing about their culture. Every culture is so different. And so a lot of our work is just being the connector to the kids and their countries. And so what we've started to do, because you can have that kind of knowledge of culture, but the other is the experience, you know, and having that spiritual connection. You can know you're from Biripi Nation, but if you've never been there and connected to country, connected to the ancestors, heard those stories from your old people, it's a whole nother level. And so what we've started to do at ID is we've called it the concrete to country camps. So we take the kids, because we, you know, in Sydney, it's kind of a concrete jungle here. There's big skyscrapers and, you know, there's glass, and underneath all of that is country. So we, but the kids are from different mobs, right? So we take the kids back on country, and it's been amazing. I think one young boy who's 16 didn't know much about where his mob was from, and we just did a camp just recently, and we were able to connecting up with some of his family and some of the elders there, and it was an amazing experience on Yuin country. And that young boy come back, and we had said, what did it mean for you not knowing about your culture and now, feeling connected? And he said, well, I feel like I have a greater sense of belonging, and therefore I'm able to make better decisions in my life. And I think you couldn't put it in a better way. And so, that's a lot of the experiences that the kids have had. But even myself, like I've, obviously grown up in care, didn't know my family, being able to go back on country, being able to dance on country. And I suppose as a kid, I didn't really have I didn't have anyone to call mum and dad as a kid growing up in out-of-home care. And that was probably really hard times for me as a kid, because, I was really good at sport, and I put the most I possibly could on the sports field, did really well. May have scored the most points on the football field, but the real winners were the kids who had their mums and dads there supporting and walking home, and even the kids who didn't do too well on the field, they had that supportive network around them. And I was so envious and so jealous of every kid who had someone there for them. I was top on the scoreboard, but that didn't matter. These kids were winning in life in my eyes. So I never really had that support network, but it was only until I went back and I actually met my family. I had that greater sense of belonging. I found my purpose, which was, to start up this organisation and to go back into the system that failed me as a kid. But a lot of, I guess, how I've come to where I am today is all about relationships. It's all been through the positive people that I've met along my life and surrounded myself with. I've kind of lent on them, and they've helped me in so many different ways. So I have definitely walked in many different footprints to get to where I am today.
Deadly. Thank you, brother. There's so much rich and deadly things that I think we can just yarn about for hours here. But I guess the one that's stood out for me really is there's a couple of things actually. So relationships, and you've mentioned Tony Robbins there, and I guess my favourite quote is from this deadly woman. If you haven't looked her up, Google Rita Pearson. She's done this incredible TED Talk. She's actually an African-American educator, but she talks about the fact that every child deserves a champion, someone that, can see their potential, be there to support them. And, I'm really, really grateful. I guess our experiences, brother, have been very different. I could have quite easily grown up in a white family or in out-of-home care from losing my mum at a young age. And, we struggled, in Redfern and in Waterloo. But what I did have growing up was that connection to my culture. And often people will say, well, what do you mean, like when you've got this connection to culture, connection to country? And it's something that's often really difficult to describe. It just sits, for me, it sits in my chest. And, I had the opportunity to go back to country, and I always went back to Walgett. I engaged in Aboriginal dance. I had all my mob family and community around me. We didn't have much else, we really struggled with a lot of things, and the trauma and the intergenerational trauma that a lot of our kids I guess, are born with. There's research these days as well that talks about it takes about six generations, I reckon, to get rid of that intergenerational trauma, and unknowingly our kids are born into the sad stories. And I know that was my story. Mum grew up in Namar Reserve in Walgett in a little tin shack, very racist country. Wasn't she was 15 when she first became a citizen of this country. Had never had nice things to say about white people, which is, I think those relationships now. And I'd go home to say, Mum, they're not all bad. There's some really deadly white teachers or people down there, that are trying to do good things for our kids, but just to try to break down some of those barriers. But one thing that, and we've all yarned about today is that connection to culture and that safety. Nicole, you touched on that as well. And when we talk about cultural safety, there are lots of things that people can do. I work in education now. I always talk to our schools about making our school settings, culturally safe. And if we can start with education, then I always say, and I believe that it will give us better choices in life and in health and all those sorts of things. When we talk about cultural safety, what does that look like, or what does that feel like if we're trying to describe it to someone that doesn't really understand what we mean, sis?
Yeah, I guess it's having the institutions like education really mindful of the delivery of curriculum and program that is cognizant of Aboriginal culture and cultural values and traditions. I think, you know, historically the curriculum has been based on, you know, Captain Cook arriving in Australia. So I think over the years we've seen a greater, you know, influence of Indigenous culture, Indigenous traditions in the mainstream education system. But I think we've still got a long way to go. I think every jurisdiction in Australia is at different phases and stages in getting into the point where we are. I know growing up here in Darwin, I was very fortunate through my high school years, secondary years, to be able to learn another Indigenous language, Yolngu-Matha. So that was delivered in our local public high school, and I had that opportunity to have that. And wouldn't that be great for every, you know, middle school, senior, secondary student to be able to learn an Indigenous language, not just Japanese or Indonesian or French? Like, wouldn't it be great to have the Indigenous or Aboriginal dialect or Torres Strait Islander dialect in schools across the country?
That's right. And a lot of our schools, a lot of our teachers now, the work that I do, you know, it's they talk about, you know, that they can't teach this stuff because they didn't learn it, you know, but there's lots of opportunities now to learn, to relearn, to unlearn. And I always, you know, I go about my work now saying, let's never allow another cohort of our students, whether they're black, white, whatever, to go through our education system, not just understanding and knowing the truth about our country, because there's a lot of sad stuff and all that trauma, and that needs to be taught, just like everything else. You know, we stop and reflect on other sad things that have happened, but the rich and beautiful culture that's there for all of us to engage with. I'm just going to touch a little bit more just on like intergenerational trauma, Isaiah, for you, brother, like, and just that, you know, I guess reflecting on your experience. And, you know, I think that you're incredible, you know, to be so strong and deadly and to be sharing your story. And I think it's really important, you know, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And I've done the same recently, you know, with writing my book, being vulnerable, sharing my story. What are the things that you would have loved to have growing up? You know, if we're talking about intergenerational trauma, unknowingly you were born into it, being a black man, you know, growing up in out of home care. What does the intergenerational trauma mean, and what are some of the things, you know, that you think that you know, child protection workers or people can do to support our young people with trauma? And what are the things that you would have loved? What was missing, you know, from your life? I know that you didn't have your mum and your dad, and I can just imagine how envious you were for those kids. You know, you could have been given everything in the world, but without that connection to family and culture. What are some of the things that could have been done differently for you?
Yeah, I think, well, intergenerational trauma, I didn't know kind of the reasons as to why I was in care, so I didn't really have that clarity. And so for me, I was kind of guessing all the time, and I'd hear bits and pieces, like my caseworker would tell me something, and then my new carer would tell me something. And, you know, I moved many different placements as a kid in care, so I never really had that belonging, but I didn't have that trust with those people. And so I was hearing all sorts of stuff as a kid. And you know, I'd hear that my mum and dad were in and out of jail, and then I'd hear all sorts of stuff about my family as well, like horrible things about my Aboriginal family. And so for me as a young kid, I was like, oh, I don't want to be connected to that. You know, a lot about drugs and alcohol and violence, and, you know, that my family just couldn't take care of me and they abandoned me as a kid. So I never knew what was true, you know, as a kid. So it was a very hard time for me. Really know, well, who am I? You know, because I think you go to your parents to figure out who's your mob, where you're from, but if you don't have that and you got all these people telling you what's wrong with that Aboriginal society family, you're kind of like, well, you know, who am I? So that was really hard as a kid. And then also, I would say, you know, intergenerational trauma, I learned a lot about it actually after connecting back with my family. You know, from the age of 2 months old, I was put into care, and I stayed in the system until I was 18 years old. So, you know, for as long as you can be in out-of-home care, I stayed there for the longest stint. And I met my family actually when I was about 22, and I met them through Facebook. I wanted to know when I was a kid, but I was always told by my carers and my caseworkers that I was never allowed to talk to them and that they were horrible people. And it was only until about 22 that I got all these like floods of messages. I actually started to get them when I was 16, but I was scared. You know, I didn't know who these people were. I was told all these horrible things and that they'll come to get me, and that's why I was in care and, you know, escaping from it. So it was like all these kind of mixed messages, brainwashed as kids. Finally took the leap of faith, and I reached back out to the messages and I said, hey, you know, this is, yes, it's Isaiah, and I, you know, would love to meet you. And eventually I met my auntie for the first time, first family member in my entire time. When I was 22, I met my auntie Sono, and she said, look, we're going to have a family barbecue back in Queensland. And I thought, okay, cool. So I went to Brisbane, where a lot of my family lived there, and went to a park, and there was about 100 people or so there. And I said to my uncle or auntie, one of the two, and I said, oh, you know, who are the people, where's the family? And they said, oh, everyone. I go, everyone? There's a lot of people here. And it was such a surreal moment for me because, you know, as a kid, I never had one person to call family. I have my younger sister, but as in anyone else externally, no one. So it was surreal. And there was, 100 people, had nieces, nephews. I even met my older sister because when I was first put into care, I was removed from all my siblings. And we grew up in different foster homes. So I don't really know them either. And so I met my older sister. She had 5 kids of her own. One of them was named after me, actually. So it's it was a beautiful moment. But actually, my nans and pops as well, some of them from the nursing home come out for it. And I remember my nana Uriel Mackey. She's the eldest in our family, a matriarch, and she gave a speech and she was saying about the story, and she'd even said in the speech that she welcomed me home and said, look, you and your younger sister are the 2 children who were lost and never found, but we're so very happy that you returned and made your way back home. And I didn't really know what that meant on that day, and I started to ask my other nans, like Nana Aileen as well, and yarning about stories and hearing more. And she told me about their experiences and then their parents' experiences. So my great grandmother and my great grandmother and great grandmother, and they told me that they were removed and taken to Barrenburg Mission Sherbrooke, and so they were part of the stolen generation. And then my mum, my great grandmother, grandfather had my nans and pops, and then they were all taken to girls and boys dormitories. And then my uncles and aunties were all removed and taken to group homes, and that was including my mum. And then me and all of my siblings were taken into out-home care. So, intergenerational trauma, I think, a lot of people, obviously a lot of blackfellas know, but other non-Indigenous people don't understand the impact and effects that it has on this today. I'm a product of that, right? For 4 generations, this cycle has been in my family, and that's why our slogan "ID Know Yourself" is break the cycle, because the cycle stops for me and it stops for every other young Aboriginal kid that walks through our program. So that's intergenerational trauma. But I also learned from my nans and pops about intergenerational resilience, and I heard their stories of perseverance and that they never stopped moving and they kept pushing forward, and they fought, the good fight for many generations. And they even heard about my great grandfather. He was an advocate for around domestic violence, and he used to stand up to other black men who were doing horrible things to the women in the community there. And back in the day, he would offer them out with the nulla, and it'd be circles, and he'd kind of make his force there. And also, my great grandmother would take in those who didn't have any food. And I've got 5 nans and pops, so I've got a big family, but they took other people in and really helped the community. So I also learned from them, the power of community, the power of caring for the next generation, caring for each other. And I think that intergenerational resilience lived with me as a kid. I think, I've got a story I'll share a little bit later about how I kind of, developed that kind of resilience as I was going through care. But I also learned about that, which was, phenomenal. Going back on country and meeting my family and hearing those stories was really empowering for me. And to also know, I guess, the clarity that my family always looked for me as a kid. They looked every single day. And it was only until, the carers and the caseworkers would make threats to the family that they eventually kind of stopped. But that was, you know, many, many years. But they said that they never forgot about me and my younger sister. They always wondered where we were. They just didn't know. So I think the department could have done, obviously, a way better a job at connecting me back to my family, and it wasn't as important, I think, back then. I think we're having discussions now about, you know, importance of family and culture and stuff. But when I was a young kid, you know, people were just like, oh, well, you know, the stories are true, the stereotypes, the racism was very existent.
That's right, brother. And I think that's where people get it wrong. You know, the thing, as long as a kid is, you know, fed, they're in a safe, they've got a roof over their head, you know, all of these other things, you know, are really important for our kids. And I love what you've said there. And, you know, we need to break those cycles. We absolutely need to, you know, acknowledge that intergenerational trauma is there. But I think we're all professionals in this space today. We can all do our part to break that cycle and do a little bit more. And I love what you said. And I often say that as well as, you know, the sadness, the heartache, the health issues, all the stuff that we're born into as blackfellas. You know, one thing that we do carry within each and every one of us is the fact that we come from the longest living surviving culture in the world. So we carry that strength and resilience with us every single day. And I know that I'm who I am because of that strength and resilience. And a lot of my family now have all passed away, you know, and you know, that intergenerational trauma, not only does it, you know, our mobs are over, you know, that we're incarcerated, we're in out of home care. You know, some of the schools that we work with, you know, you go into work in JJ centres and most of the kids in there are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. Like, it's really heartbreaking, and obviously that then has an impact and flow-on effect to the trajectory of where their lives end up, you know. But I think that's one message that I think that we all need to make sure that we let our kids know is not to focus. We need to acknowledge that it's there and do our part to acknowledge that trauma. But the important thing that we should really shine a light on is that strength and resilience is what we have as Aboriginal people, and the importance of family and culture. Nicole, over to you, sis. You've been, you know, I know that and I've been up in the NT recently. A few of my family members and friends are carers up there, and so I know the work that you're doing up there. And are there any things that, you know, that have popped up that you want to share just from listening to these yarns, or a little story? We always remember stories, and I know that when I engage in professional learning or webinars, I'll always take away the stories. And there are lots of comments that are coming through on the chat as well, and I'm actually going to stop and I'm going to read some of the questions out soon, but I thought we'll just I'll pass back over to you, sis, if you'd like to share a little bit more about the work that you're doing or your experience or a story.
Yeah, look, Kylie, I've got lots I'd like to tell, but I'll keep it a bit short. And look, I just want to say, Isaiah, thank you for sharing your personal story. You know, I really appreciate your openness and your rawness in that, and all strength to you going forward. Yeah, look, our office obviously do engagements with children and young people generally, but also children and young people involved in the systems, whether it's child protection system, out-of-home care, or youth justice system. So just up on screen, these are a couple of quotes from a couple of young people. Like, we have some really general engagement sessions around, you know, what do you like about your community? What would you like to see happen in your community? But majority of the time, we've got young people talking about culture and what culture means to them. So just a couple of quotes, you know, a young person, 13-year-old in Minyeri community said, "It's good living here, go out bush every day, talking about our culture and how strong it is and learning new things from the older people." You know, going back to that topic around education and the importance of education, to be able to open the doors to Aboriginal people and Aboriginal communities, to invite Aboriginal families into the schoolyard, open that gate up a little bit. And that's the kind of, you know, the outcome is that quote from that 13-year-old there. The other thing, just from a personal perspective, I guess, I think it's important to acknowledge my grandmother as a stolen generation member herself. She was removed from her family and community in Central Australia at the age of 8 years of age. She was taken then from what is desert country and placed over on saltwater country on the Tiwi Islands, from the very bottom of the territory right to the top of the territory, where she was raised in a Catholic mission all of her life. Her story, her resilience has supported and shaped me to be the person that I am today. And just listening to Isaiah, just one really quick story I'll give is I was sitting on the bed as a teenager, sitting around with my mum, with my younger sister, talking, just having a yarn, having a laugh, and Nana comes down and she sits with us, and then all of a sudden she starts crying. She just, just broke down uncontrollably crying. And Mum, myself and my sister looked at Nan and was like, what's wrong, Nan? What's the matter? And she had to catch herself and get herself composed, and she just said, I didn't have this. She said, I didn't have a mum. I didn't have siblings to sit, to share, to laugh, to bond with. What they knew growing up in the mission were the nuns and the priests who, didn't treat them so well, and, often left them in situations which no child should be left in. But out of this, she had that cry, she had that, sit down and talk with us. But she's always said, and she's always maintained, what happened to me, it's done, it's something that happened, and she had to be strong and resilient for her 5 children. She went on to have 5 children of her own. And so, fortunately, I'm a product of my grandmother, who's a strong Aranda woman, who wanted to break that cycle. She was the one that said, I'm not gonna go into, ongoing intergenerational cycles. She struggled over the years with, her experience and what's happened, but she didn't want her children to grow up with that trauma that she was dealt with. So that's just a little story I thought I'd share.
No, I really thank you, sis, and thank you to both of you, actually, just for really just sharing these stuff. And I mean, these are the things that people are going to remember, and I think that these are the stories that people need to take away. I've got a similar yarn, sis, that I'll just share really quickly as well. You're making me think about my old nan. My nan and both my mums have all passed away now, so I do carry their strength and resilience. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household full of girls, since my auntie took me in when my mum passed away. Grew up with my sisters, but I always remember my nan. She was alive until I was 16 years old, and Nan actually grew up on Warrabinda Mission. It was 400 k's inland from Rockhampton, and by the time Nan was 6, she'd also lost both of her parents. So back then, the white people were sort of like colonizing, and there's said to be about 17 different mobs that were all placed on Warrabinda Mission, and that broke down all those, the kinship structures that were there, that our people would, just to actually go on to somebody else's land. But I guess what happened was, like Nan, my old great-grandfather, he was a tracker, so he was known as a clever old man. And there's a lot of these clever old people in our communities, He was smart, he knew the land, and the police actually had him working as a tracker. And apparently that's where our name came from. So my last name's Captain. A lot of people always say, that's a very white name, but it's actually the name that came from my grandmother and my great-grandfather, because these white police officers, he was deadly and smart. They called him the Captain. So apparently there's that's how our name. But when Nan was 3, her old mother had passed away, from those introduced diseases, tuberculosis, all those diseases that were. And sadly, she ended up taking her own life, when my Nan was 3 years old. By the time Nan was 6, her father had passed away. Back then, blackfellas were seen as a dying race, So old grandfather Rowley had passed away in his 40s. And Nan, thankfully for Nan, she did have a couple of sisters, and they went and they kind of all got split up. But there was an old grandfather who was, with blackfellas, it's not just your mum, your dad, and your immediate family. It's the whole community that are there to support our kids. And thankfully for Nan, she had an old grandfather. She used to refer to him as Grandfather Cross. Took her back down to Walgett, where all the rest of her mob was from. And Nan had the opportunity to grow up on Namai Mission, Namai Reserve, on the banks there in the little tin shack. But she grew up knowing who she was, and always gave thanks, for old grandfather Rowley, and just, she was able to grow up really strong, and she always shared these stories, about resilience and being strong. And Nan was in a wheelchair, she was set on fire, playing two up, she was an old dark woman, but all the trauma and sadness, that she'd experienced as well. But, I guess our old people are the strongest people, and all I remember is Nan, is how strong she was, and you just brought those memories flooding back now about Nan. And I think we need to keep those stories and those memories alive, so that our young people can know that they do come from, I guess, a long line of strong people. And Isaiah, I'm sure, brother, that you've learned from a lot of your old people as well. And, you're a very strong brother now. It's amazing. I think that's something that we should all be really proud of, and that's something that each and every one of us on the call today need to continue to remind our kids is about how strong we are. I'm just having a look at just let me check the time here because we get carried away. Could be here for a few hours and still yarning up. Lots of yarning today. I might actually just go now to a few of the questions actually, and just they're coming through now. I can see them. So just bear with me for a minute. So what do you think the solutions are to keep siblings together? For example, you know, Isaiah's story was heartbreaking, to only meet your sister as an adult brother. Like that's, you know, that could have been prevented. So the question is how do we prevent this from happening?
I suppose, you know, when the problem wasn't I didn't have family. You know, I come from one of the largest families in Queensland. I relate to the Mackies, the Dawsons, Leones, the Sandys, the Birchells. You know, I got a lot of family, a lot of mob up there. But, you know, as a young kid, kind of grew up in pretty much I grew up in pretty much all my placements were non-Indigenous families. I didn't have that family connection. So, yeah, and I wasn't even on country. Like I was completely from pretty far away from Northern Territory or Butchulla, you know, Queensland way. So all the way in New South Wales, and I grew up in many country towns, in Yass, in Bynalong, in Goulburn, lived in Tumut for a bit, lived in Griffith, and then I moved my way to Sydney, where there was, I guess, opportunity. And I kind of grew up everywhere, but I think the lack wasn't, I didn't have, you know, there was family there. The lack of effort was on the department side. Like the family were knocking at the door. That's the other thing. You know, there's always that saying, oh, we couldn't find any family members. Well, there was family, you know, and I suppose as well, like there was, you know, some of those stories I heard as a kid, maybe some of them were true. Yes, I had some family members who were in and out of jail, and, you know, other family members not doing too well. But then I also had some other incredible family members, like I was saying, Nana Aileen. You know, she did a lot for the community up there in Zilmere in Queensland, and also Ani Sono. She runs a organisation called Strong Women Talking, and Uncle Sammy as well. He runs a program called Boss Boxing, and then also I've got my daily Uncle Fred, who is the cultural man, song man. And so, you know, I have family there who definitely could have looked after me as a kid, but the disconnection was the effort. You know, there was no person who was willing to actually yarn with my family and see who could potentially take me in. So I suppose it's all about, and a lot of the kids that we work with as well, you know, a lot of their, as I said, half the time we're being the connector for the kids. And, you know, we've had times where we've connected with their family and all it's been is a phone call and a yarn and talking about, you know, the importance of this young person having that connection and knowing where he's from or knowing where she's from and understanding, you know, who's part of their kinship system and, you know, who other support networks. Because I think, you know, most of our kids or even, you know, Aboriginal families, communities, there's a lot of people within a lot of the kids' families. And I think there's such a missed opportunity, I think, in terms of, you know, those first steps when their kids are in child protection and potentially, you know, going to that point of taking into out-of-home care, or if they do, then that disconnection's lost and that the kids just goes through the system not having those relationships. So as a kid that went through it, I definitely know the importance of it, because if you grow up without your family, it's a very lonely place. And, you know, it's a really dark place when you don't have support or you're not listened to. And especially on top of that, if you go through, you know, some really unsafe placements as well, then you feel even more less supported and lonely. So I think it's not rocket science at the end of the day. I always think it's just literally making the effort, connecting the kids up, making sure that through their whole transition or whatever their journey is, that they've got those relationships throughout their journey.
Amazing. Nicole, any research, and actually I'm going to put this to both of you, actually it's another comment, it's probably a really important one that people would want to know, like Isaiah, the work that you do, brother, with your ID, Know Yourself, you know, there's a lot of various programs and resources out there. I mean, for any, you know, child protection workers or people that are working with our families and communities, what resources, I mean, where would you tell them to start? What resources are available to support them in their work, to understand culture more, or ways to, better engage with our families and communities. Nicole, I'll pass to you. Are there any resources that come to mind that you think that people, whether it's a book or an online, whatever it might be?
Yeah, look, I might just plug the Secretariat for National Aboriginal and Islander Childcare. There's a number of resources and publications that they put out at the national level. Every state and territory have their own organisations, whether they be, non-Aboriginal organisations in this space doing, some good work with Aboriginal families, but more so our Aboriginal community-controlled organisations in this space, so the Aboriginal Islander childcare agencies. They're always doing great work. There's always great programs, great supports, trainings, forums that they're continually promoting through their services. So I think that would be the first best place to start. And so people would know within their own jurisdiction who those ACOs are and those non-government agencies that are doing this work.
Nice. And I know that your little business is amazing, brother, and you're doing incredible work. So if you've got others that are around the country, are there any other resources or things that you would recommend that our colleagues engage with?
Yeah, I think a great one that I love, I always go back to it actually, is the Family Matters report. And that's an amazing tool, because it also talks about a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today. It talks about kingship, the importance of that, or intergenerational trauma, speaks about that, and it gives you context around how big of a challenge this is within Australia, because it's not just an Aboriginal issue, it's an Australian issue. If you're an Australian, then you have a responsibility to make sure that the things that happen in the past don't happen in our present. And we know that, unfortunately, the rates of removal has risen so much by the rates of removal since stolen generation. It's going to keep on rising, let alone, that's the numbers of the kids going into care, but the experiences and the journeys, child protection, the kids going into juvenile justice, homelessness, unemployment, mental health, that trauma that the kids are exposed to. And these kids are unfortunately, one of the most disadvantaged kids in our whole country. And I think, as First Nations kids of this country, their country, and also respect to our ancestors who have kind of persevered and kept culture alive for us. I think we owe it to them to make sure that these kids are nurtured and safe and protected, and that that every child, kind of said the theme, every child in every community deserves a fair go. And I think that says it in everything. Like these kids are behind the 8 ball since day one, and it shouldn't be that way. As it's very interesting, because I'll meet other kids and they'll go to me. They'll go, I meet kids in our program, I say, and they go, oh, did you grow up in out-of-home care? And they will say to me, they'll go, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's terrible. Man, I didn't know that. That's sad, man. And they don't even know my whole story. They just know I've been in out-of-home care. And so they know, and most of the kids know, that if you're in out-of-home care, you're behind the 8 ball from since day one, and you're going to be worse off than better off when going into the system. So I think that kind of, the Family Matters report is a great tool, and it's a great tool to be an incredible ally to learn a little bit more. Because, I grew up in out-of-home care, but I didn't know how significant, or the rates of removal, or all the other things behind the scenes and what happens, and to other kids as well. I thought I was the only kid in out-of-home care, but it's helped me actually become a better ally for our kids as well.
Really important.
Sorry.
Go, Nicole.
Just going on from that, I think it's really important that Isaiah's mentioned the Family Matters report, and also the AOHW Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle indicators that they produce are really critical, and it really paints the picture around the need to better understand the Aboriginal child within the context of not only their nuclear and immediate family. We don't just live within, that nuclear family definition. We have mob, we have extended family, have extended community who are family, so understanding that, I think this, every state and territory could do better in finding placements for Aboriginal kids. And I think for me, the best practice is Aboriginal family-led decision making, so enabling the opportunity for family where there is a child in need. So, you know, families struggle, we all struggle. That shouldn't be to the detriment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people should have the opportunity to be self-determining, and through Aboriginal family-led decision making, be part of those significant decisions about their own children. At the end of the day, children belong with their family. I can't stress that enough. So I think building on, you know, every state and territory should be doing better. The Family Matters report really indicates that the territory are one of the worst performers in terms of placing Aboriginal kids with Aboriginal family. As at 30 June 2021, 65.1% of all Aboriginal kids in care were with non-Aboriginal carers. So only 31.8% with Aboriginal people, not necessarily Aboriginal family as well. So we've got a long way to go up here particularly, and I'll keep advocating and lobbying as hard as I can. Yeah, I think it's really important thinking about the question in relation to how do you keep sibling groups together critically. It's really detrimental, the separation, the trauma caused by removing children, and then the subsequent trauma of separating siblings is just I was just dumbfounded by it. So I think there are great models across the country, and I'll give a little plug to Tunganjira, who are here in Central Australia, who run, they're called safe houses. They're essentially a family group home model. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks to go out and check out a new house that they've got, but they've been running with one safe house in Alice Springs for many, many years, and now they've got an additional safe house, which gives the opportunity. It's run by an Aboriginal organisation, you know, predominantly Aboriginal people running the service, and they have the opportunity and the luxury to place those sibling groups together, albeit for an interim period until family for those children can be assessed, can go through the hurdle, jump the hurdles that the department requires to be able to be assessed by the department and being approved as carers for those kids. So we need more group home type models that are culturally appropriate and culturally responsive to the needs of Aboriginal children, because our mob don't just have one kid, they have 2, 3, 4 kids, and so sibling groups and the care of sibling groups is important.
Nice. Yeah, look, I'm going to touch on really quickly around, that's, really valid and incredible stuff that you're both sharing there. And I know that everyone on the call today will be taking away, some of these stories and the resources, to help them in their work as well. And there's so much that can be done. A lot of people have this really stigma. They often feel like their hands are tied, that our communities and families are so disadvantaged, that racism does still exist within this country. And it's about breaking down some of those barriers. And the way that I like to counteract that is to really highlight the deadly people within our communities, like Isaiah, brother, you're a great example. Even just by sharing your story, you mentioned you were in out of home care, but they'd probably meet you now and you'd see you as a really highly functional professional. Well, you did all right, but obviously you're breaking down those barriers now. And one thing that the reason why I decided to come back, and I've worked in education for 30 years now, and one thing that I do all the time is just to highlight deadly black fellas that are doing really good things in our communities, because I'm sick of people stereotyping us. We still hear all those racist comments, drunks and all the rest of it. And then what we do highlight, the media highlights, is the fact, we've got our footy players, we've got our artists, we've got our musicians, and our kids need to see themselves in what they aspire to be as well. So I really believe that for our kids in care, it's really important that we share those stories, and share those like real life stories of people that have done it tough and that they've come through all right. And I remember growing up in Redfern and Waterloo, and I own my story at, 14, 15. I went down the path of, really heavily addicted to drugs, into a life of crime and theft. And if a teacher didn't intervene and support me, I can honestly say that I probably would have ended up dead or in jail, because that's the path that I was heading down. But one thing that changed things for me, and Isaiah, it stood out when you mentioned, you're in out of home care. So I didn't know that black fellas were successful in these like jobs, corporate jobs. I knew about the footy players. I went to school with most of them, the artists, and that was never me, and I think it's really important that we do better, as well as highlighting within our communities. Australia is such an incredibly diverse country, but letting people know about the Isaiahs, letting people know about the Nicoles. And, you know, I would have loved to hear about, you know, the teachers and the lawyers and the business owners, you know, and the authors. And one thing that changed things for me was when, you know, at a really crucial time, what my school did, they knew they didn't have any clothes or money to get into the city, but they organised for me to do my work experience with the Department of Aboriginal Affairs. Really quick story, but yeah, they gave me a $50 voucher to get in there. They gave me a Metro 10 pass, and I walked into this big flash building. I was a fish out of water. At this point, I was only going to school probably 2 days a week, often stone, hanging on for dear life in Year 10. But I remember going home. It was a light bulb moment that changed my life. I remember walking in, seeing all these deadly blackfellas in there that were doing family research, you know, helping our stolen generations. And that's when I knew that I had a purpose. I could see myself in others, you know. So I think it's real. I went home to mum going, oh, dressed up real flash in the city doing all these amazing jobs. And I think that's one message to everyone on the call today as well, is find out who are local people within your communities. Let our kids know that they're there, you know. And I think the media does us all a really disadvantage, you know. We're not all sporty, we're not all artists, we're not all musicians. I'm none of those. But one thing that I have found, you know, I want to be a big author and I want to be a teacher. Like, I love that sort of stuff. But our kids are very talented, they're very smart, and we need to continue to share those stories, those success stories as well. Really important. Isaiah, I can see you smiling up and commenting there. Do you agree with me, brother? Nodding away there about those role models. Like, you're an amazing role model, you know, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Galangong Yin, thank you, Kylie. Definitely. I had some, you know, incredible role models. I think as a kid, in out of home care, it was tunnel vision. It was about just surviving. It was never about, you know, becoming the best in anything. It was kind of it was just about like, am I gonna? A lot of the time I was like, you know, am I gonna wake up tomorrow? You know, as a young kid, I didn't really have a lot of hope. But I do remind myself of a time where I lived in a small little caravan park in Western Sydney, and I was being abused in this place. I was about 6 years old. It was my earliest memory, and I was in a field of grass. And I remember just being a dark day. I was really angry, frustrated. You know, I still wear those physical scars on my body. What happened to me as a kid there. I still remember them. But this memory is what I focus on. And I remember going to this field of grass, kicking these rocks, and I was kicking them, and then I found this old ruggedy ball, and I threw it as hard as I could to the sky out of frustration and anger. And I looked for the next half an hour for that ball. I couldn't find it anywhere. And so, you know, at just 6 years old, I probably created the most empowering belief I could ever have, which was that I must be a superhero and I have superhuman strength. So as a young kid, I always would remind myself where I was feeling that kind of hopelessness. I'd think about that situation. I go, you know what? This is what a superhero must go through. They have to go through these things. And it was only until a couple of years ago I heard a quote by a guy named Zig Ziglar. And as soon as I read it, I was like, that was my experience in care. And it was, if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. So it was that time when I was 6 years old, I would think about that strength that I had, and that gave me a lot of hope in the future. So the experiences I had in care were difficult, but it definitely made it a lot easier, and I could kind of look to other people. And I had one incredible role model, Uncle Eric Bell. He was a nun or elder. I lived with him for a short amount of time, and he was a community man. He worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. He was just like he'd go to work, he'd do something before work, then he'd go into work, and then he'd go and work in gardens till very late in the evening. And he'd also go collect wood. And each time he was gardening or collecting wood, I would go and follow him and have a yarn with him. And yeah, he was the one who got me into sport as well and made me run up this hill. And I was quite quick. And he's like, all right, we're going to get you into rugby league. You're going to play for the Yass Magpies. And I was like, oh, man, all right. And so I started my journey there. But he was an incredible role model and someone I aspired to be like. And I also had Kathy Freeman. I went to the 2000 Olympics as a young boy. And that's also what helped me get into sport. because my foster care at the time had said, oh, look, there's someone like you, like saying, someone who's from your background. As an Aboriginal person, I was thinking, oh, wow, she's like me. This lost kid living in Fairfield in West Sydney. And then I also had some other people at school. So I did this after school sport, and there was 2 Aboriginal blokes who used to be our mentors, and they'd just kick the footy with us. And most of the kids after school sport were blackfellas as well, all the Ngunnawal kids. So I used to play with them, and that was the best, memories I have. And I remember one time I was in a classroom in like the back area, and one of the mentors were doing kind of a yarn about getting more kids into the after school sport, because it's pretty much just blackfellas. And I don't know if any other the non-Indigenous kids wanted to come play with us, because I think we would be too deadly for them. So this guy though, he come into the classroom, he walks in and does a little yarn, and then he goes like this, he goes, "My man," and I was sitting in the back room, and I was like, "My man," and I kind of just connected with those guys, and they were exactly the people that I wanted to be around, because they're so positive and upbeat and playful. So I've had so many kind of people that I've looked to be like, and I think I've taken different attributes from the people that I want to be like, and kind of trying to follow in their footsteps and take those positive traits into what I do. So I think I've learnt a lot from others around me, and some of the elders and my nans and family, and those when I was a kid. So the role models are important, because tunnel vision is a lot of what happens to kids in care. It's all about surviving, not thriving. But I think if you can kind of open the door and get them to finally see what they can be, and a lot of what you were saying there, Kylie, about the corporate world, that we belong as much as anyone else in those working spaces. And so a lot of the work that we do, and we work with our corporate partners, and we take the kids into those environments so they familiarize themselves with it. They get to meet people. So we hopefully, they have Indigenous employees as well, so we can connect them up and have a yarn to the kids, because you can't be what you can't see, that old saying, and if you can see it, you can be it, and you'll believe it, and you'll become it. So a lot of our work is just showing them what they can be and unlocking their full potential in life. And because we all have gifts, but it's sometimes you just need that person to kind of push you a little bit and help you realize what your gifts and attributes might be in this world.
Inspiring stuff. Thanks, brother. And that one, I just love it. The title of my book is called Dream Big, and Imagine the What If. And often those what ifs, it's always like, what if things don't turn out well? What if, all these bad things? But I'm always about flipping those. Well, what if you get that deadly job? And what if you can get through, for our kids, what if things do go well, and despite all these shitty things that keep happening, like, what if things turn out well and we can live the life of our dreams? And I always say, if someone else can do it, so can I. So I've gone on my little journey of, dreaming big, and if someone else can work full time and raise their kids and study full time, or someone else can buy a home and travel the world and all these sorts of things, and so can I. And that's a really important message that I always want to pass on to our young people as well. Nicole, any comments there? Otherwise, I'm just going to go back to the chat and just read out a few of these. There's lots of questions in the chat for us we've still got about 20 minutes on the call.
Yeah, now let's go to another question, maybe.
All right. Here we go. Question for Isaiah. If you could give one piece of advice for a young Aboriginal person in care with little connection to family or culture, is feeling though they were alone with no hope, what would it be?
That they are enough, that you are enough. I think as a kid, I thought, I guess I needed all these things externally for me to be enough. I thought that, I had to make it to state cross country as a kid, and then I'll be enough. Or I had to have certain things from my carers for me to be enough, for them to tell me certain things to be enough. But I suppose, as a kid, I realized that, I was already enough, and I was a somebody. As a kid, I wasn't a nobody, like my carers used to tell me all the time, that, me as just a young boy in care, I was enough. And I think even to this very day, and like chasing all these kind of, it's interesting, you get in this success point in life and you go, all right, I'll get that and then I'll be happy. And you're always in this constant chase. But I think for, you know, a lot of my time and reflecting, you know, I have a lot more gratitude in my life, even though I didn't have a great upbringing. There's so many things that I focus on that I did have. Because when I was in care, you know, I always wanted to go, you know, I was never going to be taken to Disneyland or anything like that, but I could take myself to places in my mind, and no one could ever take me from that. So I realized at a young age that to focus on the good things that I had. And, you know, I didn't live with my older sibling, my younger brother, but I had my younger sister. And I was like, at least I have that. And that kind of kept me strong through those times. So I suppose, you know, to those supporters out there or leaders and those who walk in this journey with their kids, tell them that they are enough and that they are loved and that they are cared for and that they are already a somebody. And also I think, you know, to that whole gratitude, I think as well, is such a powerful tool, because when you're in that state of gratitude and appreciation, you feel so much more alive in life. And, you know, I do it as a kid. I guess I did a little bit. I was saying, like, with my younger sister and stuff like that, but only until I got older, I was like, man, you know what? You have so much in your life at the moment that you can be grateful for. And I guess I've had some pretty rocky roads in terms of my health and all sorts of different things along this journey in life, but it's such a beautiful life. And I always think back to, you know, the things I have, what I can be grateful for. Just writing, you know, 3 things. What am I grateful for that happened today? I do that most days. And, you know, that kind of gives me perspective, and I reflect a lot about, you know, the incredible abundance that I have.
Oh, you're speaking my language, brother. I pretty much write a couple of chapters and all that sort of stuff in my book, honestly, and goal setting created was, for some reason, you know, at 17, I decided to pick up a pen and a paper and I just started journaling, writing down my gratitude list. And even now, you know, things continue to get rocky, you know, with health issues, grief, all the stuff. And my biggest advice to anyone is just to focus on gratitude. You know, there's so much that we can be grateful for, and there's always someone out there that's doing it tougher, you know, and having that harder time. Thank you, brother. Honestly, we need to catch up for a longer yarn later on, you and I. This is not enough. I had a question here for Nicole. Where is it? It was more about, where is it? I've just scrolled up. 1 second. Around culture. I'm going to read it out exactly. Where is it? 1 second. All right. What? No. All right, I can't find it just now. There's lots of comments in the chat. It was more around that culture, and particularly for our non-Aboriginal carers, Nicole. That was kind of what it was about. So what can they be doing to, I know that for me, you know, when I work with schools and communities down here, I encourage everyone to get out and celebrate with our communities and our cultures. You know, our biggest celebration down here is Yarwun, like our survival day every year. And I let them know, you know, around all the deadly things that are happening in the communities, and give them tools and tricks to actually, you know, to work with our families and communities. Little things like acknowledging country, being respectful of protocols, understanding our kinship systems. The question to you was around, the importance of culture. What can our non-Aboriginal carers do to best support, and how do they bridge that gap with working with our communities?
Yeah. So just online, we've just got a little resource I'm going to plug, you know, Larrakia Healing Group. They developed these resources in the previous slide as well in 2015. And it's got some really important prompts in there around, you know, just, you know, seeking cultural advice and engaging with those, they call them community navigators. So finding those people in the community who you can leverage off that support as a non-Aboriginal person, doing that respectfully. The other thing is, you know, to, again, with working with our ACOs and understanding, you know, the Aboriginal medical services within your locations, like the children that you have in your care, you can take those children to the services, and leveraging off those people within those services, but also within the broader care group. There's organisations across, I know in Sydney there you've got ABSEC as a peak body supporting carers. You know, there's a lot of community events that ABSEC support. So just using those people within those positions, going to those organisations. Also, Aboriginal workers within the departments. You've often got an Aboriginal community worker or DOCS worker that you can engage with to get that support. Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Lots of really deadly resources. I can see a few of the other chat questions now. What can we do? For the people listening today, what can we do differently so we don't have so many kids living away from their mob? Housing and employment and things that we can't just fix I guess our kids need more. So what can we do differently for kids that aren't living with their mob, to make a difference for housing, employment? Any other words of advice? And what can we do? How can we, or the individuals that are online today, make a difference? What are the little things that they can do?
Yeah, I'll go. So I guess in the NT context, it's a big one. The rate of notifications for Aboriginal children and the harm type being neglect. So that's reflective of, the socioeconomic circumstances of those children and their families. We have overcrowding as a major issue here in the Territory. Communities where you've got, 30 people living in the one house with no functional toilet or shower. So, those basic necessities of life, running water, clean water. There's a resolution to this, and I think for families or children and their families who come to the attention of statutory services, there needs to be a prioritisation of getting those families the support that they needed, whether that be housing to get a roof over their head, to link them in with the support services that they need, not only for the child is the focus, but often mum, dad and whoever else is caring for these kids need the support themselves to be a better parent, to better cater for the needs of their children. So a lot of the kids that are coming to the attention of child protection here in the Territory, and I'm just talking from a Territory context, are related to, the socio-economic issues that underlie the child protection system here in the Territory.
We can get in early. I mean, I remember when I first started to work with DOC, I was placed in the child protection team, and I quickly went to my boss, who now works with NAPCAN, and said, can I go? I want to work in early intervention. I want to work with I want to work with the communities, before things get bad, so we can keep our kids with family. And honestly, that was back in 2007. That was a long time ago. And I still see families now that come up and thank me going, Kylie, what you did back then made a difference, just helping us with our housing applications, helping mum get into a rehab, helping to get some counselling, helping to navigate and coordinate, with the school to get some school kids and shoes, clothes and shoes, because the family was too ashamed to go and ask for help. And that's the big thing for a lot of our families and communities. They don't trust government or non-government agencies or the people that work with them. So it's really important that we do, that we've got Aboriginal people that are there working to help break down those barriers. And you allowed my mind just to wander there. And these families that I did work with all that time ago, honestly, still come and say what a difference that it made. Culture is safety, really quickly. We've only got about 12 minutes to go, but this was the comment now. Culture is safety, Nicole. What does it mean for non-Aboriginal people? What does culture look like in practice so that non-Aboriginal carers can better understand it? Just in a couple of words, what does it mean when we talk about culture and safety?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of ensuring an Aboriginal child or Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander child's connection to culture, it's about having those relationships with the child's family and community. If they can't live with them, make sure you're maintaining that connection. Don't disconnect. And I reflect back on the conversation you had, Isaiah, about being told that Aboriginal people are drunks, they're no good, they're detrimental. A number of the inquiries that we've done here and in more recent times have shown that we've had non-Aboriginal carers of kids really putting in those negative, detrimental that story into these kids' minds, and that carries with these kids. So, being positive about culture, being positive about, traditions and in connection, and, allowing that child to to maintain that is important. If you don't, it's detrimental. The issue is, you know, the sense of self, and as kids develop, as they go through their developmental phases to understand who they are, and particularly at the pre-teen age, if they don't have a strong sense of who they are, where they belong, and to be able to ground themselves, you end up with a series of other detrimental outcomes, such as, you know, mental health and education disengagement, and you know, going into a life of offending and ending up in the youth justice system. So not being able to stand up proudly and say, you know, I'm a larrikia, Wodjigan and Aranda woman, and being able to live that, to be able to go on country, to go hunting. You know, last weekend I was on my grandfather's country shooting magpie geese. Sorry for all the vegans and vegetarians out there, but, you know, shooting magpie geese and sitting there plucking magpie geese, and taking my 2 daughters with me and having them sitting out bush, you know, winging geese and plucking them, and then coming home and then being able to give that to my mum, to my nana, to my cousin, to family, to give them, you know, goose, which is our delicacy up here. But, you know, that's what culture, why it's safe. It keeps me safe. Culture now, at being a strong Aboriginal woman myself, culture now keeps me grounded. I can't forget who I am, where I come from. Every day I get a call from a community member saying, hey, you know, you're in this role. This is what we need you to talk up about. But, it's culture is safety. It's particularly important through, you know, the early formative years and going into pre-teens for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids to know who they are, where they come from, who their mob are. And like Isaiah's story is one, you know, of the majority of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids who go into the care system, is when they leave the system, they go back to mob. They go back to find who they are and where they come from. So if you're not doing it for those, you know, 18 years that they're in care, you're delaying and you're stalling that connection and that relationship.
Well, I was going to say, it's so hard as blackfellas because we are very, you know, I guess, what's the word? We are very, we you know, when you've got someone that's just come back, you know, and I'm just reflecting on, I work really, like, we've got the Kinchela Boys Home Corporation down here in Redfern, you know, and hearing those stories of those uncles, you know, some of them that have been placed in those homes. It's similar, you know, for those kids that are placed in care, so they then go back all these years later to try to find their family, find their community. It's really hard if you don't grow up with those connections. And like you said, even if they can't live with their families, the importance of just maintaining that connection, knowing that you got that cousin there or auntie there. And, you know, I don't get to see all of my nieces and nephews all the time, you know, in Walgett and Maureen, everywhere else, but they know that they can ring Auntie Kai, you know, and we've got that connection. And when they come to Sydney, you know, they get excited and I get excited. We still maintain a relationship, even though we're not together every single day. So it makes a difference to our kids and communities. And it also, like, it's really detrimental to them if they try to go back without having that connection. Our communities, it's really difficult to accept people back in, you know. We don't know who, you know, like, it's a whole, in regards to, you know, the black politics and communities and looking after our culture and knowing who our mob are. It's really important. I'm going to just, one last question, I think, before we almost begin to wrap up, and it's a really a good one here right on the end. So it says, we need to hear more stories about intergenerational resilience. I'm big on this, you know, I talk about it all the time. Anyone that I get the opportunity to engage with, I'll always be talking about highlighting deadly people within their communities. How can we get media and community talking more about this rather than the disadvantage? Isaiah, I'll pass to you first, brother. What can we all do to start to talk about the good stuff and the deadly role models and that resilience within our communities?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, hey, like, you know, often at the time perception can be reality, right? But perception often the time isn't true. And those stereotypes of racism that we see, it's, you know, I guess as I said earlier, as a young kid, I was on the end of that perception. I was like, oh, well, that must be true, you know, because, you know, in the communities I lived in as well, I saw a lot of just as like 8 years old, I'd see people get locked up. I'd see some of the fellas in the community on drugs, high on drugs, and I'd be just playing at the local park, you know, with the other Aboriginal kids, and I guess that was quite scary as a kid. and I thought, well, that must be, that's what I'm going to be like one day. And, it was quite scary, but it was only until I got older and I, met these other incredible people like Eric, or Pop, we called him, and also, seeing other people like Kathy Freeman, all these other role models, that it kind of broke those stereotypes. So I suppose and I still hear, a lot of racism and stereotypes, and, whether it be wherever, just yarning with someone new and people going, oh, you're Aboriginal, are you? And then they'll say, racist things or just uneducated things. And, it's kind of, a lot of that is just the lack of awareness. Like, people just haven't really, they're just kind of following that wheel. I think but if people actually met others, like, that whole thing, like, oh, Aboriginal people are not hardworking, or they get opportunity and, they don't take it. And I was even yarning to someone last night about, oh, so why, Aboriginal people why don't they just take the opportunities? And I was actually talking about, well, mate, I don't know if you really know the true history of this country. I was like, mate, do you know really what happened here? And do you know a little bit about, I actually talk about Intergenerational. And he's like, oh, no, what happened? And I'm like, mate, you have to do some research. There's a lot of things happened, horrible things. And I started to talk a little bit, and he's like, man, I did not know. And I was like, well, now, further to that statement earlier, would you say that again? And you go, no, I wouldn't. And so I think, there's a big education piece around truth telling. But I think we need a lot more platforms like this to be able to be heard. And so we can change that narrative of what we've heard in the past, because, it's not true. I've met many incredibly hardworking Aboriginal people and caring people who are doing incredibly well, successful in so many different fields. But I think if people haven't seen it, they don't believe it. So I guess that's a great way we can start to change the narrative. But it also starts not just with Aboriginal people. It starts with non-Indigenous people starting those conversations with other people. And it all starts from a conversation, a yarn. And then we might start these changes.
Our people love to yarn, and I think that's where it all starts. Absolutely. I've recently started a podcast. I've only got about 13 episodes at the moment, but my goal is just to highlight and talk to deadly people in our communities, black, white, whatever, but importantly, people like just our ACLOs, and not just, but, our ACLOs and community members, and listening to their voices. It's really, really important. We're almost out of time, actually. I want to sit in yarn forever, but I might just one take home for the audience. If they're going to remember one thing today, what would you like them? And the big dreams. I'm all about dreaming big. I want our kids to know who they are, to know that they are smart and that they're deadly and that they're loved, and that Aboriginal people are amazing. We're the longest living culture in the world. That's my piece of advice for the audience today. Really to know that we are valued. We need our voices to be heard. One piece of advice from you, Sis, for the audience. I know that you've given lots today, so thank you.
No, yeah, I just on what you're saying, it's just important to support Aboriginal children. It's important to support all children, but it's important to support Aboriginal children to be strong in who they are, where they come from, and where they're going. I think that's for me today. This conversation has been about the future, the aspiration stuff, to give those kids, link them in with the right mentors, the right people to guide them on a path. Not every Aboriginal kid is deadly at sports. Majority are, but not everyone is. So what is it that you can expose these children to give them a bit of taste of what they can be in? And not only just the one chance. Like, our kids need the opportunity to try something, see if they like it. If they don't, give them another option. Just keep continuing to support them, to push them as safely as you can, but really just supporting them in themselves, in their identity, and who they are and where they're going.
Deadly. And to never give up. It's really important that we never ever ever give up on our kids. Sometimes they need many chances, and maybe just that one chance is the time when they will take it and they'll trust you enough to actually engage with it. I know that was my thing, and I'm so grateful, and every single day I give gratitude, for certain people not giving up on me. One last, in about 30 seconds, brother, piece of advice, one piece of advice for the audience.
Yeah, I think, in discussion today, I think about when I connected back to my family and culture, and it was culture that gave me belonging, but culture also gave me peace. And as a kid, I thought I needed, pleasure. I wanted all the fancy materialistic stuff, but it was obviously through my experiences and the trauma that I was exposed to, I thought that was going to help me. But it was only when I connected back to culture, it actually gave me that sense of peace and healing and empowerment. So I think that's why it's so important for those on the call to connect our kids back home to family, back to community, back to culture, back to their ancestors who can welcome them home. Yeah, that's really important. And even, I suppose, as well, take care of yourself. It's a really hard, space to be in. I think, all of us work really hard and tirelessly to support our kids. Just as much, you can only support others to the capacity that you support yourself. So look after yourself and keep in the back of your mind your why. Like, why are you here? And that'll keep you strong. There's a old quote: if you know your why, you can endure anyhow. So keep that in the back of your mind as well as you push forward and support these incredible, amazing kids.
Beautiful stuff. Look, thank you so much. On behalf of the NAPCAN team, on behalf of everyone that's online with us today, a very big thank you to you both for giving up your time, for sharing your yarns, to sharing your stories, your vulnerability, your courage, everything that you guys are doing. I think that you're absolutely amazing. A very big thanks to NAPCAN for providing us with the opportunity to come on and to yarn this very special week this week. Look, thanks so much for joining us. That is all we have time for today. They'll be posting other webinars as well on the NAPCAN site, so please go on and have a look. This recording will be sent out. There is a short survey as well that will be posted, so please take the time and give the team your feedback. We'd love to know what resonated with you most, or any other feedback in regards to any other things that you would like to see from these webinars. Look, it's been a really incredible yarn today. Thank you very much. For more information, go to our campaign and just visit www.napcan.org.au for more information. But until then, just let me double check. I've just been so engaged with all of the yarns today, but that is all. A very big thank you to each and every one of you. Have a lovely day. Stay safe and stay deadly. Thanks so much. Bye for now.